On the coldest night of winter, a veteran Navy SEAL thought his life was finally quiet, until his dog refused to let him open the door. Outside, 3 freezing lives waited in the snow, silent, fragile, and not abandoned by accident. What began as a rescue soon revealed a truth powerful people wanted erased. Because sometimes evil doesn't arrive with violence, it arrives with patience and paperwork. And sometimes, God sends His warning not through words, but through instinct. Where are you watching from today? Like the video, subscribe, and welcome to K9 Navy SEAL Legends. The cabin stood alone, where the spruce thinned and the land sloped toward frozen river flats. A structure built for survival rather than comfort. Squared logs, darkened by decades of wind and snow, leaned slightly into the cold as if bracing themselves against it. The porch light cast a small amber circle onto the snow, barely enough to remind the darkness that a human life still existed here. Inside, Kate Harrigan moved with the economy of someone who had learned long ago that unnecessary motion wasted heat and attention. He was 28, tall at just over 6 feet, shoulders broad beneath a fitted camouflage long-sleeve shirt that clung to him not as decoration, but as habit. His build was not exaggerated, not the sculpted bulk of someone chasing mirrors, but the quiet density of a man who trained because stillness felt wrong otherwise. There was a faint scar near his shoulder, pale against his skin, the kind that healed cleanly but never entirely left the body or the memory. Cade's face was angular, clean-shaven, American in a way that felt unintentional. Strong jaw, straight nose, eyes the color of cold steel mixed with faded sky. Blue-gray, steady, observant. He did not speak much, not because he lacked words, but because he preferred to know which ones mattered before using them. People often mistook his silence for calm. They were wrong. It was vigilance that had simply learned how to sit still. He had not come to Alaska's interior to disappear. He had come here for order. A kettle rested on the stove, beginning to murmur. Cade checked the fire once more, then the latch on the back door, then the small security monitor mounted near the window. Routine was not superstition. Routine was structure, and structure was the only thing that kept certain memories from walking too freely through his head. Behind him, nails clicked softly against the wood floor. Nick stood near the doorway, black and tan coat catching the firelight in sharp planes of muscle and shadow. A German shepherd bred and trained for work, not show, compact, balanced, powerful, without excess. His ears were upright, alert even at rest, and his amber eyes tracked the room with a discipline that mirrored Cade's own. Nick's was 5, old enough to know what mattered, young enough to still respond instantly. There was a faint hitch in his left front step when he shifted his weight, a legacy of an injury from a life before this one. He did not limp. He adjusted. Dogs like Nick's did not waste energy on complaint. For months now, every night followed the same pattern. Nick's would station himself near the door once the sun dropped. Not guarding in the theatrical sense, no pacing, no growling, but present, watching. A living threshold between the warmth inside and whatever waited beyond it. Cade trusted that position more than any lock. The wind rose outside, pushing snow against the windows in dry, whispering sheets. The thermometer nailed to the porch post read -10 Celsius and falling. A cold that stripped sound from the world, leaving only edges. Cade poured water into his mug and turned toward the window. That was when Nick stopped. Not stiffened, not bristled, stopped. His body aligned, spine straight, ears angling forward as if tuned to a frequency Cade could not yet hear. He stepped once, precisely, into Cade's path. "No," Cade murmured, not as a command, but as a question. Nix did not look at him. Cade felt the shift then, a tightening behind the eyes, the familiar sensation of a room changing shape without moving. He set the mug down. Nix moved again, placing himself squarely between Cade and the door. No sound, no warning, just refusal. Cade had learned to read that language in places where hesitation killed. This was not danger rushing toward them. This was something already there. He pulled on his boots, shrugged into his jacket, and reached for the door. The moment he opened it, winter rushed in like judgment. Snow lay in, drifts along the porch boards, clean and undisturbed except at the base of the steps. 3 shapes huddled together, so close they looked like one body trying to remember how to be whole. Puppies. German shepherds, no more than 8 weeks old. Their coats were dusted white, fur stiff with ice crystals. One trembled in sharp, uncontrolled bursts. Another held one front paw slightly off the ground. Weight shifted awkwardly. The smallest lay almost still, sides moving with shallow, uneven breaths. Cade crouched instantly, training overriding thought. "Easy," he said softly, letting his voice carry warmth before his hands did. They did not run. That struck him harder than the cold. Wild things ran, abandoned things often did too. But these 3 lifted their heads, just enough, and looked at him with eyes too large for their faces, eyes that held no fear left to spend. Cade slid his hands beneath them, surprised by how light they were. Too light. He carried them inside in one careful motion, cradling all 3 against his chest. Nix followed, positioning himself beside the hearth the moment Cade set the puppies down. He did not sniff them, did not intrude. He watched. Cade worked quickly. Towels warmed near the fire, gentle pressure along ribs, fingers checking ears, paws, gums. The trembling one responded to warmth. The injured leg showed abrasion, but no break. The smallest wheezed once, then quieted when wrapped in wool. "Stay with me," Cade murmured, though he wasn't sure which of them he meant. As the puppies settled, he noticed something else. A smell. Faint. Out of place. He leaned closer, inhaled carefully. Beneath the sharp, clean scent of snow and wet fur was something wrong. Chemical. Acrid. Mixed with a metallic note, like hot iron cooling too fast. It was not the forest. It was not the cabin. Nix rose and moved to the window, nose lifting, ears angled toward the tree line. And then Nix did something he had not done since the last. Deployment. He sat, not resting, not waiting, anchored. A posture he only took when he needed to mark a certainty. Cade felt it in his chest before he understood it with his mind. That quiet, internal click, the one that meant something had already crossed a line. He moved to the window, scanning the white expanse beyond the porch light. Nothing but snow and black spruce. No movement, no sound. Yet Nix did not relax. Cade's breath fogged the glass as he stared into the dark, the smell still lingering on his fingers. Someone had been close, not hours ago, recently. The storm eased just before dawn, leaving the world stripped bare and painfully clear. Pale light crept over the snowfields, revealing details the night had hidden. Cade stepped onto the porch, boots crunching softly. At first he saw nothing. Then he knelt. There, near the edge of the porch boards, a faint compression in the snow, parallel lines, shallow, already softening under the morning cold. Tire marks. Not deep, not careless. Placed. Cade followed them with his eyes until they vanished toward the narrow access road that wound through the trees. The marks angled just enough to suggest a pause, a stop, long enough to set something down, long enough to choose. Behind him, Nick stood in the doorway, watching the same line with an intensity that felt almost human. Cade straightened slowly. 3 lives did not end up on his porch by accident. Not in this cold. Not like this. He turned back toward the cabin, toward the small pile of blankets by the fire where the puppies slept in fragile, uneven rhythms. For the first time since leaving the teams, Cade felt the old sensation stir. Not adrenaline, not fear. Purpose. Someone had tried to leave a problem in the snow. Instead, they had placed it in his hands. And Cade Harrigan had never been very good at walking away from things that were placed there deliberately. The veterinary clinic sat at the edge of the highway, like something forgotten by time. A single-story building with faded green siding, its sign half buried in snow, the word veterinary missing 2 letters that had likely fallen off years ago and never been replaced. The parking lot was a flattened patch of ice and gravel, scarred by tire tracks that told stories of urgency rather than routine. Cade Harrigan cut the engine and sat still for a moment. Inside the truck, the heater hummed softly. 3 small bundles lay wrapped in towels on the passenger seat, their bodies pressed together as if warmth itself were something that could be shared. Their breathing was uneven, but present. Cade kept one gloved hand resting lightly on the smallest pup's back, feeling the shallow rise and fall beneath his palm. Nick sat in the rear, upright, his posture steady. His amber eyes were fixed on the clinic door, not scanning for threat but measuring, as if the building itself needed to be read before entered. Almost there, Cade murmured, though he didn't know who the reassurance was for. He stepped out into the cold, the air biting cleanly at his lungs, and carried the puppies inside. The warmth hit immediately. Not the comforting warmth of a home, but the sterile, regulated heat of a place meant to preserve life without sentiment. The smell was a mix of disinfectant, old wood, and something faintly animal that no amount of cleaning ever fully erased. Behind the counter stood Dr. Rowan Pike. She was in her late 30s, tall and lean, with shoulders slightly rounded from years of bending over exam tables. Her hair, light brown with hints of ash, was pulled into a low ponytail that spoke of practicality rather than style. Pale skin, weathered just enough to suggest long winters and longer hours. Her eyes were a cool gray, sharp without being unkind. Rowan had grown up on a ranch 3 counties south. It showed in the way she moved, direct, economical, with no wasted gestures. She took one look at Cade's arms and the bundled shapes within them and didn't ask unnecessary questions. "Exam room," she said, already pulling on gloves. Cade followed her through a narrow hallway into a room barely large enough for the table and 2 chairs. Nix paused at the threshold, then entered, positioning himself near the wall where he could see both the door and the table. Rowan raised an eyebrow at the dog. "He yours?" "Partner," Cade said. That earned him the faintest hint of a smile. Rowan worked methodically. She checked temperatures first, frowning slightly at the numbers. Her fingers were gentle but precise as she examined paws, ears, gums. She lifted the injured pup's leg, noting the abrasions along the fur where skin had been scraped raw. "Dragged," she said quietly. "Not long, but enough." The smallest pup wheezed once, a thin sound that barely deserved the name of a cough. Rowan listened to his chest longer than the others. Her mouth tightened just a fraction. "Hypothermia," she said. "Mild to moderate on all 3. Respiratory irritation on this one. They'll live, but they didn't get here on their own. Cade hadn't expected them to. Rowan reached for a scanner and ran it along the sturdier pup's neck. A single chirp sounded, then silence. She tried again. Nothing. She moved to the second. Same result. The third, after a moment, triggered a faint response. Rowan leaned closer, adjusted the angle, then sighed. "There was a chip here," she said, tapping gently beneath the fur. "Past tense." Cade felt something cold settle behind his ribs. "Removed?" "Not cleanly," Rowan replied. "More like damaged. On purpose." She set the scanner aside and reached for a small vial. With practiced ease, she drew a tiny blood sample and slipped it into a handheld analyzer. They waited in silence as the machine hummed. Nix shifted. Not pacing, just a subtle change in stance. His ears angled toward Rowan, then toward Cade, then back to the puppies. The analyzer beeped. Rowan read the screen, her jaw set. "Low-dose veterinary sedative," she said. "Enough to keep them quiet. Not enough to stop breathing." Cade exhaled slowly. "They didn't want them dead," Rowan continued. "They wanted them silent." She met Cade's eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. The understanding that silence in the wrong hands could be weaponized. Rowan wrapped the puppies more securely, handed Cade a small bottle with dosing instructions. "Keep them warm, feed small amounts, bring them back tomorrow." Cade nodded. As he turned to leave, Rowan added, "This wasn't an accident." "I know." The drive back felt longer. The sky had shifted to that pale, brittle blue that came after a storm, light sharp enough to hurt if you stared too long. Cade kept his eyes on the road, but his mind replayed Rowan's words with mechanical precision. Sedative, damaged chip, drag marks. Someone had taken steps. At the cabin, Cade carried the puppies inside, settling them near the hearth. Nix resumed his place by the door, posture calm but alert. Cade went straight to the security monitor. He rewound. The footage jumped back in time, grainy and colorless. Snow drifted across the lens like static. Then, headlights. A pickup truck rolled into view, slow and deliberate. It stopped just beyond the porch light's reach. The driver's door opened. The figure moved carefully, bending once, twice, 3 times. The entire stop lasted 11 seconds. Then the truck was gone. Cade replayed it twice more. No license plate, no logo. Just a shape and a pause that felt intentional. He shut off the monitor and rubbed his face with both hands. Nix rose and approached the puppies for the first time. He lowered his head, sniffed gently, then stopped at one of the towels. Something clung to the fabric. A thin orange thread. Cade plucked it free, rolling it between his fingers. Synthetic. Bright. Not something you'd find in a forest. Nix's ears flicked forward. He inhaled sharply, then sat, eyes fixed on the thread. Construction gear, high visibility material. Cade stared at it longer than necessary. "This isn't a trafficking ring," he said aloud, more to steady himself than to convince anyone. "This is small, local." It felt better to think that. Contained problems could be solved. He fed the puppies, watched them drink with weak but determined effort. Life asserting itself in tiny increments. Night fell again, quiet and deceptively peaceful. Cade stood at the window, the orange thread coiled on the table behind him like a question he wasn't ready to ask. Nix let out a single, low huff. Not a growl, not a warning, a sound Cade recognized from another life, when something familiar had returned wearing a different shape. Cade turned. Nix was staring at the door, not the outside, the door itself. As if danger wasn't approaching, but had already been close enough to leave something behind. Morning came clean and cold. Cade stepped outside, scanning the snow for anything he'd missed. The tire marks had softened further overnight, nearly erased. Nearly. He photographed them anyway. Back inside, he logged the time of the footage, noted the sedative, the damaged chip. And then he did nothing. No calls, no reports. He told himself he needed more information, that reporting too early would spook whoever was responsible, that this was likely a small operation, careless but contained. He told himself many things. Nix lay near the door, eyes half-lidded but alert. The puppies slept by the fire, unaware that their survival had already pulled a line through the snow, one that would not stay invisible much longer. Cade Harrigan chose silence, and in doing so, stepped directly into its center. The hospital rose from the edge of town, like something temporarily anchored to the earth. 3 stories of pale concrete and narrow windows, its shape softened by years of snow piling against its walls. It was the only medical facility within 80 miles, a place that smelled faintly of antiseptic, old paper, and winter coats that never fully dried. People didn't come here for miracles. They came because there was nowhere else to go. Cade Harrigan parked in the far corner of the lot, where the plows rarely reached. He shut off the engine, but didn't move right away. On the passenger seat, the 3 puppies stirred inside a padded carrier, their small bodies warmer now, heavier with life than they had been 2 days ago. One lifted its head and pressed its nose against the mesh, fogging it with a soft breath. Nix sat upright in the back. His posture had changed the moment the hospital came into view. Not alarmed, focused. His amber eyes followed the building as if it were a terrain, feature rather than a place, something to be read carefully before entered. "Easy," Cade murmured, resting a hand briefly on the carrier. "We're just visiting." Nix did not respond. He never did to reassurance. The lobby was quiet in the way rural hospitals often were. No rushing crowds, no constant alarms. Just the low hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional murmur of voices drifting from down the hall. A nurse at the desk glanced up as Cade entered, her eyes immediately drawn to the carrier. "Animals aren't usually—" "I called ahead," Cade said calmly. She checked the screen, nodded once. "Room 406. Cade followed the corridor down, boots echoing softly against the linoleum. Nix walked at his side, close but not crowding, his presence a steady line of warmth against Cade's leg. Room 406 was halfway down the hall, its door cracked open. Inside, the air felt heavier, not stale, weighted. Quinn Wexler lay propped against white pillows, thin blankets tucked carefully around her. She was 72, her body narrowed by illness, but not diminished by it. Her hair, once dark, had gone completely silver, brushed back neatly from her face. Fine lines traced her skin, but her eyes, sharp blue, steady despite the oxygen line beneath her nose, still held authority. A woman who had spent decades telling others what to do in moments that mattered. When Cade stepped inside, Quinn's gaze moved to the carrier. She stilled. Then her hand lifted, trembling slightly as it hovered over the bed rail. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, my God." Tears filled her eyes before she seemed to realize what was happening. "My babies?" Cade set the carrier gently at the foot of the bed and unzipped it just enough for the puppies' faces to appear. One whined softly, recognizing something it could not name. Quinn's shoulders shook once, then again. "They're alive," she whispered, as if afraid to speak the words too loudly. I thought her voice broke. She turned her face away, one hand covering her mouth. Behind her, 3 other figures shifted. The first was Cole Wexler, 33, standing near the window with his hands clasped loosely in front of him. He was tall, well-groomed, his dark hair neatly styled, face clean-shaven and smooth in a way that suggested careful maintenance. His suit was understated but expensive, tailored to fit without drawing attention. When he spoke, his voice carried a practiced warmth. "Quinn," he said gently, "you should rest. This might be overwhelming." The word might landed heavier than it sounded. Beside him stood Sienna Vale, about 30, slender, her honey blonde hair falling in soft waves to her shoulders. Her skin was flawless, her posture perfect, hands folded at her waist like punctuation. She wore a cream-colored coat over a burgundy dress, her expression composed into something that resembled concern without quite reaching it. And near the door, Rory Madsen. He was 38, thick through the neck and shoulders, his body carrying the density of someone who relied on physical presence more than words. Stubble shadowed his jaw, uneven and dark, as if he shaved when reminded rather than when needed. His jacket was a utilitarian gray, scuffed at the elbows. His eyes moved often, rarely settling for long. When Cade stepped fully into the room, Rory's gaze snagged on him, and then on Nick's. Nick stopped, not in fear, in placement. He moved one step forward and angled his body subtly, positioning himself between Cade and Rory. His ears were upright, his tail low but still. No growl, no baring of teeth, just a line drawn in space. Cade felt his pulse change. This wasn't threat response. This was recognition. "Your dog," Rory said, his voice rough. "Is it necessary?" "He goes where I go," Cade replied evenly. Quinn looked between them, confusion flickering briefly across her face. "It's all right," she said. "He's beautiful." Nix did not take his eyes off Rory. Cade turned back to Quinn. "I found them 2 nights ago," he said quietly. "On my porch." Quinn swallowed. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew I didn't imagine them." Cole stepped closer to the bed. "Quinn, you were very ill that night. You were confused." The words slid into the room like something rehearsed. Quinn frowned. "I was tired," she said. "Not confused. I remember filling out paperwork. I remember—" She stopped, her brow furrowing. "I remember feeling sleepy. Too suddenly." Sienna leaned in, her voice soft. "Stress can do that. And medication." Quinn hesitated. Doubt crept in, quiet and insidious. "I suppose," she said slowly. "I've been wrong before." Cade watched her shoulders slump, just a fraction. Nix shifted his weight. Cade knelt beside the bed, lowering himself to Quinn's eye level. "You were planning to transfer funds," he said carefully. "For an animal rescue network." Quinn's eyes sharpened. "Yes, I was. A mobile unit, for people out past the plowed roads." She nodded once, as if reaffirming something to herself. "Animals are often all they have." Cole's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And then," Cade continued, "you don't remember finishing that decision." Quinn looked down at her hands. "No," she said. "I don't." Silence filled the room. The puppies whimpered softly, sensing the tension without understanding it. Quinn reached out, her fingers brushing the carrier. One puppy pressed its head into her touch, eyes closing. Tears slid down Quinn's cheeks again. "I don't trust my own memory anymore," she said quietly. and that frightens me more than being sick. Nix took a slow step forward. He did not approach Quinn. He moved closer to Rory. Then he sat, square, unmoving. His gaze locked onto Rory's chest, nostrils flaring once as he drew in scent the way others drew in breath. Rory shifted, just slightly, enough for Cade to see it, enough for Quinn to notice the movement she hadn't been looking for. Cole cleared his throat. "I think that's enough for today," he said, his tone still polite, still controlled. "Quinn needs rest." Quinn didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were on Nix, then on Rory, then back to Cade. "You brought them back," she said softly, "which means someone took them." No one spoke. "I need time," Quinn continued. "Time to think. To remember." She looked at Cole. "And space." Cole forced a smile. "Of course." Sienna nodded, already stepping back. Rory lingered for a beat too long before moving aside, his gaze never leaving Nix. Cade zipped the carrier closed and stood. As he turned toward the door, Quinn spoke again. "Mr. Harrigan?" "Yes, ma'am." Her voice was steadier now. "If my mind is being erased," she said, "I want to know who's holding the eraser." Cade met her eyes. "So do I." Outside, the air felt colder than before. Nix walked slightly ahead this time, scanning the path with deliberate care. Cade glanced back once at the hospital windows, one lit square among many dark ones. This wasn't about stolen dogs. It was about something far quieter, the slow removal of choice. And someone had underestimated how loudly that kind of theft could echo. The gas station sat alone at the bend, where the highway thinned into nothing. One pump on each side, a squat garage attached like an afterthought, its corrugated metal doors scarred by decades of winter. Snow had been plowed into uneven walls around the lot, gray with gravel and oil stains. A hand-painted sign near the door read, "Open," even when the place was closed, as if optimism itself were part of the business. Cade Harrigan parked beside the garage and cut the engine. Nix was already alert, not tense, oriented. His ears angled forward, nose lifting slightly as the cold air rushed in. Cade watched him for a moment before opening the door, waiting to see whether the dog's body would commit to a direction. Nix stepped down, paws crunching softly on packed snow, and moved in a slow arc toward the pumps. He paused near the far one, head low, nostrils working. Cade followed. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Nix stopped beside a set of faint tire marks, half buried by new snow. He inhaled again, deeper this time, then looked back at Cade. Not excited, not alarmed. Certain. Inside the garage, the air was warmer and smelled of oil, old rubber, and burnt coffee. Behind the counter stood Elias Brandt, late 50s, compact and stooped, with a beard the color of stove ash and hands permanently stained by grease no amount of scrubbing could fully remove. His flannel shirt was faded thin at the elbows, his eyes sharp in a way that came from watching people pass through without ever staying. He looked up as Cade entered. "Afternoon," Elias said. "Not many folks out this way unless they're lost or looking." "Looking," Cade replied. Nix sat beside him, posture calm but watchful. Elias's gaze flicked briefly to the dog, then back to Cade. "That's a working shepherd." "Yes, sir." "Figures." Elias nodded once. "They don't miss much." Cade leaned against the counter. "I'm trying to track a pickup that came through here during the storm 2 nights ago. Late." Elias scratched his beard. "Plenty of trucks came through, most fueled up, left quick." "This one didn't," Cade said. "Didn't buy anything." That got Elias's attention. He turned, reached beneath the counter, and pulled out an old monitor hooked to a battered DVR. His movements were slow but deliberate, like someone who didn't like being rushed into decisions. "Let's see," he muttered. The footage was grainy, black and white, time-stamped in blocky red numbers. Snow streaked across the lens, headlights flaring as vehicles rolled in and out. Elias paused the playback. "There," he said. A pickup truck idled near the edge of the lot. The driver never approached the pumps. The truck sat for less than a minute, then rolled forward and disappeared back into the storm. Cade leaned closer. The angle wasn't good enough for a plate, but the shape of the truck, the slight dent along the rear quarter panel, was unmistakable. "Ever see it again?" Cade asked. Elias nodded slowly. "Belongs to a fella who does odd security work around town. Name's Rory. Doesn't come in often. When he does, he doesn't talk." Nick shifted at the sound of the name, though Cade hadn't spoken it aloud. Elias noticed. "That dog react to names now?" he asked, half joking. "No," Cade said. "He reacts to patterns." Elias grunted. "Smart animal." He hesitated, then added, "Truck didn't buy fuel. Didn't buy coffee. Just sat there like the driver was waiting for something, or someone, to finish." Cade straightened. "Can I get a copy of the footage?" Elias studied him for a long moment, weighing something invisible. Then he nodded. "Yeah, I can do that." Outside, Cade crouched near the pumps again, studying the ground. Nix moved suddenly, turning sharp toward the road. A man was walking across the lot, mid-30s, bundled in a high-visibility jacket streaked with reflective orange stripes. He carried a toolbox, boots heavy with snow and salt. His beard was thick and uneven, his face reddened by cold. He glanced at Cade, then at Nix, slowing instinctively. Nix stood, ears forward, body angled, a posture Cade knew too well. The man froze. "Hey," he said, raising one hand. "Easy." Cade's muscles tensed automatically. His mind began assembling a narrative too quickly. Orange thread, reflective material, night storm. Nix took a step forward. Cade stepped with him, and then stopped. He saw it then. The man's eyes. Wide, startled, not calculating. The kind of fear that came from being misread, not from being caught. Cade lifted a hand. "Nix, down." The command was quiet but firm. Nix hesitated for half a heartbeat, then sat. The man let out a breath he'd been holding. "I just fixed plows," he said, voice rough but honest. "Didn't mean to." "You're fine," Cade said quickly. "Sorry." The man nodded. Backing away, without another word, Cade knelt beside Nix, resting his forehead briefly against the dog's. "That was on me," he murmured. Nix licked his glove once, confused but compliant. Cade stood slowly. Instinct was a tool, not a verdict. As they drove away, Cade glanced in the rearview mirror. Nix was watching the road behind them, not the gas station, not the man in the jacket, but the space between, as if something important had passed through it, unnoticed. Night came early. The cabin stood quiet under a sky heavy with cloud, the wind threading softly through the trees. Cade fed the puppies, checked their breathing, and stacked fresh wood by the hearth before turning in. He woke to silence that felt wrong. Not the clean stillness of snow. A disturbed quiet. Cade reached for his jacket and stepped outside. The woodshed door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, the neat stack of firewood he'd split earlier was overturned, logs scattered across the floor. Nothing was missing. No tools, no supplies, just disorder. Cade stood in the doorway for a long moment, cold creeping up his legs. This wasn't theft. It was message. Nix circled the shed slowly, nose low. He stopped near the back wall, inhaled once, then looked at Cade. The look said everything. They were here. Cade photographed the scene, documenting angles, footprints, the bent latch. He didn't sleep much after that. By morning, the decision he'd been avoiding had settled into place. He drove back into town, past the hospital, past the courthouse he'd never wanted to walk into. Instead, he parked beside a modest brick building across from the clinic. Inside, the waiting area was small, but orderly. The walls held pamphlets about patient rights and advocacy, their corners worn from use. A woman rose from behind the desk. Gemma Linhart was in her early 40s, average height, dark hair pulled into a severe bun that softened when she smiled, which she did carefully, as if smiles were tools to be used with intention. Her face bore the calm lines of someone accustomed to being listened to only when things had already gone wrong. "Yes?" she asked. "I'm looking for a patient advocate," Cade said. "You found one." They sat across from each other in a small office. Cade laid out the facts without embellishment, the dogs, the sedative, Quinn's fading certainty, the truck, the message at the cabin. Gemma listened without interrupting. When he finished, she folded her hands. "You understand," she said, "that what you're describing isn't just animal cruelty." "I do now." "It's undue influence," Gemma continued. "Medical, financial, psychological." Cade exhaled. "I hate paperwork." Gemma smiled faintly. "Most people do. That's why it works." She met his eyes. "If you want to protect Quinn's agency, you have to bring this into the system. Quietly. Correctly." Cade thought of the woodshed, of the logs scattered without reason. "I should have done this sooner," he said. "Yes," Gemma replied gently. "But you're here now." Outside, Nix waited, posture steady, gaze lifted toward the hospital. Cade stood beside him, the weight of the choice pressing down. For the first time since leaving the teams, he stepped toward something he didn't understand. Law, procedure, vulnerability. But he understood one thing clearly. Silence had failed. And he wasn't going to make that mistake again. The conference room smelled faintly of toner and burnt coffee. A narrow window let in a stripe of winter light that stopped short of the table, as if even daylight hesitated to involve itself in what happened here. Cade Harrigan sat with his forearms resting on the laminated surface, hands loosely clasped. Nix lay at his feet, head up, eyes open, alert without being conspicuous. Across from them, Gemma Linhart flipped through a thick folder. Her movements were calm, almost gentle, but the content beneath her fingers was anything but. "This," she said, tapping a page, "is not how confusion is documented." Cade leaned forward. Gemma slid the page toward him. Medical notes, typed in neat blocks, dates circled in pen. Patient appeared confused. Patient repeated questions. Patient disoriented regarding financial matters. The phrase appeared again and again, sometimes twice in the same day, sometimes written by different staff members using nearly identical wording. "That's normal?" Cade asked. Gemma shook her head. "What's normal is context, causes, correlation. What you're seeing is repetition without investigation." She turned another page. "No independent neurological consult, no cognitive baseline assessment, no imaging, nothing that would justify escalation to incapacity." Cade felt his jaw tighten. "And if they do escalate?" Gemma didn't answer immediately. She met his eyes. "If Quinn Wexler is deemed cognitively impaired, even temporarily, financial authority transfers to the next legal guardian." "Cole," Cade said. "Yes." The word settled between them like a piece of ice dropped into warm water. Gemma closed the folder. This kind of harm doesn't leave bruises, she continued. It leaves delays, paper trails, time. Nix shifted slightly, sensing the tension in Cade's posture. That afternoon, Cade drove out to the veterinary clinic again. Rowan Pike was finishing up with a limping husky when Cade arrived. She washed her hands, dried them on a paper towel, and studied his face. "You found something," she said. "Maybe," Cade replied. "I need to ask you about your supplies." Rowan's brow furrowed. She motioned him into the back office, a cramped space with filing cabinets and a single desk cluttered with invoices. "I don't like where this is going," she said. "Neither do I." Rowan pulled up records on her computer, scrolling through purchase logs. Her fingers moved quickly, efficiently. "Sedatives," she muttered. "Here. Ketamine derivative, low dose, common in transport." She stopped. Her eyes narrowed. "This batch number," she said slowly. "I've seen it before." She turned the screen toward Cade. A donation record glowed on the monitor. Medical supplies purchased under the umbrella of a charitable foundation, one that funded animal welfare initiatives across the region. The listed administrator, Cole Wexler. Rowan leaned back in her chair, lips pressed thin. That batch was distributed through a charity pool, which means it wasn't tracked the way clinic inventory is. Cade stared at the screen. "Can you prove this sedative came from there?" he asked. "I can prove the lot number matches," Rowan replied. "And I can testify to that." Cade nodded slowly. "That's enough." He found Cole Wexler that evening in the hospital cafeteria. The place was nearly empty, just a few staff hunched over late dinners, the muted clink of utensils echoing softly. Cole sat alone at a corner table, jacket draped neatly over the back of his chair, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as Cade approached. "Mr. Harrigan," Cole said, standing politely. "I was hoping we could talk." Cade gestured to the chair across from him. "So was I." Cole sat, folding his hands on the table. Up close, his features were precise. Sharp jawline, smooth skin, eyes that measured rather than reacted. He smiled, but it didn't reach them. "I understand you're concerned about my aunt," Cole said. "So am I." "You're concerned about her capacity," Cade replied. "I'm concerned about her autonomy." Cole's smile thinned. "Those are not mutually exclusive." "No," Cade agreed. "But they're not the same thing either." Cole leaned back slightly. "Quinn is 72. She's ill. She's vulnerable." "So are the people who depend on her," Cade said. "The ones she was trying to help." Cole's jaw tightened. She was being taken advantage of. "By who?" Cade asked. Silence stretched. For the first time, Cole's tone shifted, lost its softness. "By idealism," he said. "By strangers with good stories and poor accountability." Cade held his gaze. "You mean like the dogs?" A flicker, gone almost instantly. "That's an emotional argument," Cole said. "Courts don't care about emotion." "No," Cade replied. "They care about patterns." Cole stood. "I think this conversation is over." Cade watched him walk away, the ease with which composure returned to his shoulders. The next morning, Cade received the call he'd been expecting and dreading. Hospital administration. "Mr. Harrigan," the voice said politely, "due to concerns about patient agitation, further visits with Ms. Wexler will be limited for the time being." Cade closed his eyes. "You're cutting off access," he said flatly. "We're protecting her well-being." The line went dead. Cade sat in his truck for a long time afterward, the steering wheel cold beneath his hands. Time. That was the weapon. Nix rose suddenly in the passenger seat. His ears went forward, body angling toward the sidewalk outside the hospital entrance. Rory Madsen stepped into view. He wore a different jacket this time, dark, unremarkable. But the scent hit Nix instantly. His posture stiffened, nose lifting, drawing in air with focused precision. Nix's growl was low, almost inaudible. Cade followed his gaze. Rory's hand brushed against the pocket of his jacket as he walked. Cade didn't need to see what was inside. Nix already had. That night, Cade met Rowan again. Briefly, quietly. They didn't talk long. Evidence was mounting, but slowly. Too slowly. Back at the cabin, Cade paced the room while Nix lay near the door, watchful as ever. The puppies slept in a tangled heap near the hearth, unaware that their existence had exposed a machinery built to erase voices without raising alarms. Cade stopped pacing. He looked at Nix. "You ever notice," he said quietly, "how no one here needs to hurt anyone to win?" Nix lifted his head, eyes steady. "They just wait," Cade continued. "They wait until the paperwork catches up. Until memory fades. Until people stop asking." Nix stood and walked to him, pressing his shoulder lightly into Cade's thigh. A grounding touch, familiar from long nights in worse places. Cade rested a hand on the dog's neck. "Not this time," he said. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, slow and patient. The kind of patience that could destroy a life without ever being seen. And Cade finally understood the enemy he was facing. Not violence, but time. The approval came with conditions. Gemma Linhart read them twice. Then a third time, her lips pressed into a thin line as if discipline itself were a form of protection. "One visit," she said. "Supervised. Daytime only. Framed as therapeutic animal interaction." Cade Harrigan nodded, hands resting on his knees. "And the dogs?" "The puppies stay out of sight," Gemma replied. "Nix is the therapy." She met Cade's eyes. "We don't push. We don't persuade. We don't argue." Cade exhaled slowly. "Understood." Outside the office, Nix waited with his usual stillness, the kind that wasn't absence of movement, but control of it. His black and tan coat caught the winter light spilling through the hospital windows, every line of muscle relaxed, yet ready. The dog looked at Cade once, then toward the corridor that led to Quinn Wexler's room. Room 406 felt different this time, not brighter. Clearer. Quinn sat more upright in bed, her silver hair brushed back, neatly, a wool cardigan draped over her shoulders. The oxygen line remained, but her eyes, sharp blue, alert, tracked the door as it opened. Nix entered first. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if the room itself were fragile. He crossed to the bedside and lay down beside the bed, his body aligned parallel to Quinn's, head resting on his paws. No movement, no sound, just presence. Quinn's breath caught. "There you are," she said softly. Her hand lowered, resting lightly on Nix's shoulder. The dog did not react beyond a subtle exhale. Deep, steady, the kind of breath that teaches others how to breathe. Cade remained near the door, hands clasped behind his back. Gemma stood by the chart, posture neutral, eyes attentive. For a long moment, no one spoke. Quinn closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had shifted. An internal recalibration, subtle but unmistakable. "I slept," she said, "for the first time in days." Gemma nodded. "That's good." Quinn looked down at Nix. "I don't feel rushed," she said, searching for the word. "When he's here." Cade said nothing. That mattered. The paperwork lay on a tray beside the bed. A single-page authorization for an independent neurological evaluation. Neutral language. Standard procedure. Quinn stared at it for a long time. Her fingers hovered over the pen but did not close around it. "If I'm wrong," she said quietly, "I could destroy my family." The words landed heavy. Cole Wexler stood near the window, arms folded, his posture controlled but rigid. His dark hair was immaculate, his suit crisp. He had not sat since entering the room. Sienna Vale sat in a chair near the wall, hands folded in her lap, expression composed into something carefully unreadable. Rory Madsen stood closest to the door, broad frame casting a shadow that felt larger than his presence. His jaw worked slowly, as if chewing on something unspoken. Quinn's voice trembled only slightly, as she continued, "My husband is gone. My friends are mostly memories. Cole is what I have left." She swallowed. "If I accuse him unfairly?" She shook her head. "I don't know if I can live with that." Cade stepped forward one pace, then stopped. He did not reach for the pen. He did not speak immediately. Nix shifted minutely, adjusting his position so his flank pressed more firmly against the bed. A living weight, anchoring. Cade finally spoke. "If you're not sure," he said evenly, "don't sign because of us." Quinn looked at him. "Don't sign because you feel cornered," Cade continued, "or because you feel obligated. If the truth matters, it'll still matter tomorrow." Silence followed. Cole's brow furrowed. "Quinn, that's not necessary." Gemma raised one hand. "Let her decide." Quinn closed her eyes again. She inhaled, then exhaled. Her fingers closed around the pen. Nix lifted his head, not toward the paperwork, toward Quinn's face. His amber eyes met hers, unblinking, steady, without demand. The room seemed to narrow to that line of sight. Woman and animal, breath and certainty. Quinn's hand stopped shaking. She signed. The pen scratched softly against paper. One signature, then another. She set the pen down and leaned back, exhaustion washing over her features. But beneath it, relief. Cole moved first. His composure cracked, not fully, but enough. "That's a mistake," he said, his voice sharp for the first time. "You don't understand what you're inviting." Quinn turned her head slowly. "I understand exactly," she said. Sienna remained silent, her gaze dropping to her hands. Rory took a step back, boots scuffing softly against the floor. His shoulders slumped just slightly, as if the room had lost something he relied on. Gemma collected the signed form and slid it into her folder with practiced care. "I'll submit this today," she said calmly. Cole laughed once, short and humorless. "You think this ends something?" Cade met his eyes. "No." That seemed to unsettle Cole more than anger would have. Nix rose to a sitting position, body still aligned with Quinn's bed. He did not bare his teeth. He did not growl. He simply existed, large, calm, immovable. Quinn rested her hand once more on his shoulder. "I was afraid," she said softly, "but I'm more afraid of disappearing." Cade nodded. "That's reason enough." Outside, winter pressed close against the hospital windows, snow beginning to fall again, slow, patient, relentless. Gemma walked with Cade down the corridor. "This doesn't resolve everything," she said quietly. "It just opens a door." "Doors matter," Cade replied. Nix padded alongside them, nails clicking softly on linoleum. Behind them, in room 406, Cole stood staring at the door long after it closed. Justice had shifted. Not loudly, not fully, but enough. And that was dangerous for anyone who depended on time to do their harm. The warrant arrived before dawn. Cade Harrigan stood at the kitchen table, boots on, jacket half-zipped, reading the document as the kettle hissed softly behind him. Outside, the world was still locked in winter. Trees bowed under fresh snow, the sky a pale, unpromising gray. Nick sat near the door, posture steady, ears angled forward as if he could hear the shape of what was coming before it arrived. The phone buzzed once. "County investigators on the way," Gemma Linhart said. "He's solid, quiet, doesn't like shortcuts." Cade nodded, though she couldn't see him. "That's fine, neither do I." The investigator arrived 10 minutes later in a snow-dusted SUV. Mark Halverson stepped out first. Early 50s, tall and spare, iron-gray hair at the temples, face carved by cold and patience rather than anger. He wore a flannel beneath his parka and boots that looked older than the truck. His eyes took in the cabin, the woods, Nick's, without lingering. "You're at Harrigan," he said. "Yes, sir." Halverson glanced at Nick's. "And you're the reason we're not guessing." Nick's did not move. They drove out together as the light lifted, the road narrowing into a ribbon of ice and packed snow. Halverson asked questions the way careful men do. Precise, sequential, leaving space for silence. Cade answered without embellishment. When the SUV slowed near an overgrown access road, Nick's rose, nose lifting, body leaning forward as if the vehicle itself had become unnecessary. "Here," Cade said. Halverson parked. The site had once been a temporary staging area for a construction project that never finished. Prefab sheds, a rusting container, orange fencing sagging beneath snow. Wind threaded through broken boards, carrying a sharp chemical note that didn't belong to the woods. Nick's led. Not running, not pulling. He moved with measured certainty, stopping at the container. Cade cut the padlock with bolt cutters, while Halverson photographed everything before it was touched. Inside, the air was stale and bitter. Plastic bins lined one wall. A folding table stood at the center. Sedative vials, labels peeled but lot numbers intact. A ledger, handwritten, dates and initials, amounts moved in increments small enough to hide in charity flows, and a box of collars. The leather was worn smooth by use. The tags had been sanded blank. Halverson let out a slow breath. "That'll do." Nick sat, eyes fixed on the far corner. Cade followed his gaze and found a canvas bag pushed beneath a shelf. Inside, gloves, solvent wipes, and a folded jacket with reflective orange thread stitched into the seam. "Chain's complete," Halverson said quietly. By noon, the town had changed its posture. Cole Wexler was arrested at the hospital as he attempted to file an emergency motion to delay the independent evaluation. He did not shout. He did not plead. His face went still, control retreating inward as procedure took its place. Rory Madsen was picked up near the garage, a search of his truck yielding residue that matched the vials. He stared at Nick's as they passed in the hall, jaw set, then looked away. No spectacle, just doors closing in the correct order. As Halverson finished cataloging the last item, Nick's rose and walked to the threshold of the container. He stopped, turned back once, sat. The gesture wasn't warning or pursuit. It was completion. Cade felt it in his chest before he understood it with his head. The line had been drawn, followed, and closed. The days that followed were quieter, but not easy. Quinn Wexler's recovery came in increments measured by breath and clarity. She tired quickly. Her hands trembled when she wrote too long, but her eyes held steady. And that steadiness mattered more than speed. When Cade visited, she smiled without effort. "They thought time would do the work for them," she said one afternoon, sunlight pooling at the foot of her bed. They forgot time works for whoever keeps showing up. Gemma stood by the window, clipboard tucked to her side. The evaluation confirmed capacity, she said. Financial authority remains with you. Quinn nodded. Good. She turned to Cade. I'm starting something. He waited. A mobile unit, Quinn continued. Veterinary care for elders out past the plowed roads, snowline routes. If animals are their last companionship, then care has to reach them. Cade considered it. That'll take coordination. I know, she smiled faintly. I was hoping you'd say that. He shook his head. I'm not taking money. I didn't offer it, Quinn replied. I offered work. They both looked down as Nix lay near the bed, head on his paws, the picture of patience. Field coordinator, Quinn said. You know terrain, you know people, and you listen. Cade nodded once. I can do that. Winter loosened its grip slowly. The mobile vet snow line launched without banners or press. A truck outfitted with basic care rolled out on clear mornings. Routes were adjusted for weather and need. Names were written in pencil and updated often. Cade learned to measure success in small returns. A shepherd lifted without pain, a cat breathing easier, a widow sleeping because something she loved was warm and fed. Back at the cabin, the puppies grew. They learned the yard first, snow clumps and shadows, then the woods under supervision. One grew solemn and watchful, one clumsy and determined, one curious, nose always working the edge of the world. Nix remained at the door, not guarding from fear, from habit. Cade split wood, logged roots, repaired fences. He learned the rhythm of showing up without expecting applause. Some nights, the wind still carried the old restlessness into his chest. He let it pass. Purpose, he learned, didn't silence noise. It gave it a place to stand. On the first clear morning of spring, Cade loaded supplies into the truck. Nix jumped up and settled, posture relaxed but ready. The puppies watched from the porch, tails wagging, then sprawled into the sun. Cade paused, looking back at the cabin. At the door, Nix had guarded through storms and decisions alike. He hadn't come here to be left alone. He'd come to put things in order. He closed the door gently and turned the key. There are days when people save animals. And there are days when the quiet instinct of a dog saves the part of us that remembers why we should. Sometimes, miracles do not arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they arrive quietly, through instinct, through courage, through a choice made when no one is watching. In this story, no one was saved by force. They were saved by faith expressed through action, by the belief that truth matters, that life matters, that God can work through the smallest beings, through a loyal dog, through a tired heart that refuses to look away, through a moment when fear is met with integrity. In our daily lives, we face quieter battles. Moments when staying silent feels easier than doing what is right. Moments when helping costs us time, comfort, or certainty. Yet it is often in those ordinary moments that God places His greatest purpose. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you of this. You do not need to be powerful to be part of a miracle. You only need to be willing. Check on someone who feels forgotten. Protect what is vulnerable, even when no one applauds. Choose compassion, even when it slows you down. If this story brought you hope, please share it with someone who may need light today. Leave a comment and tell us what moment stayed with you. And subscribe to K9 Navy SEAL Legends for more stories of loyalty, justice, and second chances. May God watch over you and your loved ones. May He give you strength when the path feels heavy, wisdom when the truth is unclear, and peace in your home. And may He send you, at exactly the right moment, the quiet kind of miracle that helps you find your way back to warmth.